Senator from Louisiana.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, with me today is Mr. John Lowry, who's one of my colleagues from my office, who's been a big help to me. Mr. President, as you know, when Vice President Harris and President Trump ran against each other for the presidency, one of the planks in President Trump's platform was that he was going to review every penny of federal government spending. Why did he say that? Why did he promise to do that? Well, first, there's a moral principle involved. People worked hard for their money, and when they give it to government, they're entitled to expect government to spend it efficiently. Number two, President Trump ran on that plank because of our debt. The federal debt is $36.5 trillion. You know, we throw these numbers around like a trillion, you know, we start to take them for granted. To give you a little perspective, this $36.5 trillion, it grows bigger by the second. It's going to increase. If we just keep doing what we've been doing, it's going to increase $1 trillion every 100 days. If we just keep doing what we've been doing, it's going to increase $10 billion a day. Today, nothing changed. We added $10 billion in debt. That's also $417 million an hour. That's $6.9 million a minute. I think I've been talking about a minute. We just added $7 million to our debt. That's why the president wants to get rid of spending porn. The reaction here in Washington, Mr. President, has been breathtaking. I understand Washington is not exactly a slice of America. I get that. I understand that Washington is not normal. Normal in Washington, D.C. is a setting on the dryer. So I get all that. We're different in Washington. But the pushback to President Trump's effort through Mr. Musk and his team to reduce spending has just been extraordinary. I mean, people are barking and yelping and shrieking about it. They sound like the game room in a mental hospital. And I get that a lot of people don't like President Trump, and I get that many people don't like Mr. Musk, and I get that Mr. Musk is different. I kind of like that. I mean, I like different. You know, he's the sort of guy that would wear, I don't know, he'd wear Crocs to a wedding. I get that. I find it kind of refreshing. But nobody's ever called him a dummy. And he's found an incredible amount of waste and abuse of taxpayer money, what I call spending porn. I'm not going to repeat everything I repeated or I said the first time we talked about this, but Mr. President, it seems to me to be once again extraordinary that people are mad at President Trump and Mr. Musk for the process they're using, but no, they're not mad about the money being wasted. I mean, Mr. Musk, whether you like him or not, he's found, for example, $7.9 million he found we spent to teach Sri Lankan journalists to avoid binary gendered language. He's found money that was given to an NGO to empower the LGBT community in Armenia. He found $1.5 million that we spent to rebuild the Cuban media ecosystem. $2.1 million to the BBC to strengthen the media ecosystem in Libya. $8.3 million spent for equity and inclusion education in Nepal. Does no one care about how the money was actually abused and wasted? Mr. President, it's not unusual for me to be disappointed for some things I see in Washington. And under the last administration, I have to admit, I was disappointed just about every single day. I'd almost gotten used to it. But last week, and this is what I want to talk about, Mr. President, I read a story. It was a story about the abuse of taxpayer money in the last administration. And it was so nauseating that it triggered my gag reflex. In April of 2024, not that long ago, the EPA under President Biden gave $2 billion in taxpayer money to an organization that had absolutely no experience, that was backed by a very prominent Democratic politician by the name of Ms. Stacey Abrams. Here's what happened. In 2022, as you know, Mr. President, President Biden and my Democratic colleagues passed the Inflation Reduction Act. Not a single Republican voted for it. Not one. Either in the House or the Senate. We knew at the time that spending $1.2 trillion, that's what the Inflation Reduction Act cost, would only make inflation worse, not better. And even President Biden eventually admitted that the Inflation Reduction Act did absolutely nothing to raise prices. Even President Biden, at the end of his term, admitted that. So where did all the Inflation Reduction Act money go? Fair question for taxpayers to ask. I mean, there's nothing wrong with wanting to know what they do with our money. Let me say that again. There's nothing wrong with wanting to know what they do with our money. So where did all the Inflation Reduction Act, this $1.2 trillion, go? Well, President Trump and DOGE, the group appointed by President Trump, and the EPA under new leadership, under Mr. Lee Zeldin, have begun to follow some of that money. Now, this is where Ms. Stacey Abrams comes in. I think it's fair to say that Ms. Abrams is, I don't know, I would call her controversial. She has the right to believe what she believes. This is America, and she has the right to free speech. I'm not criticizing that, even though I disagree with some of what she says. But I think it would be fair to describe her as controversial. She's probably best known for the fact that she ran for governor of Georgia twice, and she lost. In her career, Ms. Abrams has said the following. I don't want to just articulate hyperbole here. I want you to read her words, not mine. On April 20th, 2024, Ms. Abrams appeared on MSNBC with Reverend Al Sharpton, and this is what Ms. Abrams said, quote, "What we know is that the attack on diversity, equity, and inclusion, DEI, is an attack on democracy." On September 20th, 2022, during a panel discussion in Atlanta, Ms. Abrams said this about a baby's heartbeat, a fetal heartbeat, the heartbeat of a baby in a mother's womb. This is what Ms. Abrams said about a fetal heartbeat. She said it is, quote, a manufactured sound designed to convince people that men have the right to take control of a woman's body. end quote. My word, her words, not mine. In May of 2022, during a Georgia gubernatorial debate, she's running for governor of Georgia now. Ms. Abrams called Georgia, quote, the worst state in the country to live in. In October of 2022, during another Georgia gubernatorial debate, Ms. Abrams accused the sheriffs, all of the sheriffs in Georgia who endorsed her opponent, Governor Brian Kemp, of wanting, quote, to be able to take black people off the streets. In October of 2022, Ms. Abrams appeared on MSNBC. She suggested that abortion is a solution to inflation. Here's what she said. She said, quote, let's be clear. Having children is why you're worried about your price of gas. It's why you're worried about how much food costs, close quote. Her words, not mine. Let me say again, Ms. Abrams has the right to her opinion. This is America. You're not free if you can't express yourself. But I do think any fair-minded person would have to conclude that Ms. Abrams is controversial. So, in March of 2023, not that long ago, Ms. Abrams went to work for an organization, a nonprofit, called Rewiring America. You've probably seen that name in the news. Rewiring America. Ms. Abrams' title, she went to work for Rewiring America. Her title was Senior Counsel. She was paid for her work for Rewiring America. We don't know how much, though there'll probably be an investigation to find out. Now, nonprofits like Rewiring America, Ms. Abrams' group, they have to file documents with the IRS. And one of the documents they have to file is called Form 990. This form by the IRS asks a number of questions about nonprofits. One of the questions the IRS asks is where it is for the organization, the nonprofit, to list its accomplishments. Rewiring America, Ms. Abrams' group, told the IRS in 2023 on this Form 990 that Rewiring America was, quote, this was Rewiring America's, quote, startup year for the organization. And the form goes on to say that the only accomplishment Rewiring America listed was that it had, quote, joined a coalition of other national organizations to apply for a grant from the Inflation Reduction Act's Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund. In other words, Ms. Abrams' organization told the IRS that this filing was their first ever tax filing in 2023, that the organization was a startup, and its purpose was exclusively to seek a grant from President Biden's Inflation Reduction Act. Fair enough. So what do we know about this coalition that Ms. Abrams' group wanted to form? Rewiring America, Ms. Abrams' group, announced on October 12, 2023, that it was joining Habitat for Humanity, it was joining United Way Worldwide, and two other organizations. And these four organizations were going to form another nonprofit, a coalition of nonprofits called Power Forward Communities. So you've got Power Forward Communities up here, you've got Rewiring America and some other organizations down here. And altogether they make up Power Forward Communities. And they also announced that a gentleman by the name of Tim Mayopoulos, a former Obama administration appointee, would lead the coalition. Now, as a nonprofit, I told you that Rewiring America had to file forms with the IRS. Well, so did this new group, Power Forward. It had to file Form 990 as well with the IRS. According to its filings, Power Forward had just $100 in total revenues in 2023. According to the IRS filing, it didn't list a single accomplishment. I've seen Girl Scout troops with more business credentials. Yet power-forward communities, of which Ms. Abrams' Rewiring America was a part, had the audacity to ask the federal government for a $2 billion grant. For what, you ask? It was supposed to be for, quote, to expand access to clean energy by prioritizing housing, equity, and resilience. Power-forward communities said it wanted to take this taxpayer money and help people install energy-efficient upgrades to their homes. What are we talking about? Heat pumps. Get rid of gas stoves. Now, it's good to dream big in America. I'm all for that. But under any reasonable standard, Mr. President, under any reasonable standard, one is entitled to ask how these organizations, Ms. Abrams' Rewiring America and Power Forward Communities, brand new organizations, no business experience, $100 in the bank, are qualified to receive $2 billion of taxpayer money from the Biden administration. Now, that didn't stop the Biden administration from cutting a check, though. They took our money and gave power-forward communities in Rewiring America $2 billion. You want to know how we ran up $36 billion in debt? That's how. Now, the EPA announced in 2024 under President Biden, just 6 months after Power Forward was formed. Power Forward was formed, and 6 months later, President Biden and his team announced they were giving them $2 billion, and that's, as I said, that's B with a billion. Now look, I try to see the world from other people's bell towers as much as I can. But I cannot come up with, not for the life of me, with a single rational justification as to why the EPA under the Biden administration thought it was appropriate to give Power Forward and Rewiring America to brand new business, or brand new nonprofits with no business experience, no accomplishments according to the IRS forms, and only $100 in the bank to give them $2 billion of taxpayer money, especially to the exclusion of every other qualified applicant for that money, if there were any other qualified applicants. We don't know. I don't know. I don't know if there was a competitive bid. Now, I do know that the EPA, under President Biden, gave Ms. Abrams' group, her two groups, $2 billion cash. In the grant approval, President Biden's EPA said that Power Forward had to allocate this money to get rid of stoves and to put in heat pumps. They had to allocate the money. They had to spend it in 21 days. Now that meant that Ms. Abrams' group, Rewiring America, which was part of the larger group, likely received or was supposed to receive a check for $490 million, about a quarter of the total $2 billion, by the end of May 2024. And the other organizations, within 21 days, President Biden directed, were also supposed to receive their share of the money. But get this. President Biden and his team directed these NGOs to distribute $2 billion in 21 days. But the Biden administration also told Power Forward within 90 days to go take a course. You know what the course was? The name of the course was How to Develop a Budget. How to develop a budget. So, President Biden gave Power Forward 21 days to spend the money, but said, you've got 90 days to go take a course about how to put together a budget. And why would anybody in the Milky Way give $2 billion of taxpayer money to two organizations that had just been formed, that according to the IRS filings had no accomplishments, and one of them only had $100 in the bank? I think I know why. I certainly know what it looks like. I mean, this would be comical if it wasn't so odious. $2 billion. You know, the last 4 years under the last administration have been very difficult for America. The cost of everything's gone up. The cost of many things have gone up by 20%, and our wages didn't keep up. The average electricity bill in America went up 19%. The average Louisianian, because of President Biden's inflation, had to spend an extra $890 a month, extra, for food and clothing and car notes, and they didn't get $890 a month raise. President Biden and my Democratic colleagues told us that the Inflation Reduction Act, I remember when it was passed, they said if you spend $1.2 trillion on the Inflation Reduction Act, it'll be a lifeline to every family in America. It's not what it looks like to me. Starting to look like to me that it was really a slush fund. A slush fund for Washington insiders. Now, I don't want to make accusations that are unfair. I think EPA Administrator Zeldin needs to get to the bottom of this. I believe in fairness. I believe in due process. Mr. Zeldin has announced that he's going to try to claw back as much of this $2 billion and other monies as he can. And again, I think he ought to do it fairly and accord everybody due process. But you know what? If the shoe fits, wear it, Cinderella. Here's what I see. I see two organizations formed in the last year or so of President Biden's administration. On their IRS filings, they say we have no experience, we have no accomplishments. One of them only has $100 in the bank. One of them, senior counsel, is Ms. Stacey Abrams, a well-known Democratic politician. I see them asking the President of the United States and his EPA for $2 billion cash to fight gas stoves and getting it to the exclusion of every other applicant who might have been able to use that money. Now, this is just the beginning of the type of spending porn that President Trump and Mr. Musk are uncovering, that people are screaming about. I'm going to repeat what I started with. There's nothing wrong with wanting to know what they do and did with our money. And that's all President Trump and Mr. Musk are doing. Mr. President.
The senator from Louisiana criticizes federal government spending and highlights President Trump's push to review wasteful expenditures. He argues that the national debt is growing rapidly and that many taxpayer-funded programs under the previous administration were unnecessary or wasteful. He focuses especially on a $2 billion grant the Biden EPA awarded to a new coalition of nonprofits that included Stacey Abrams' group, claiming these organizations had little experience, minimal revenue, and no proven accomplishments. The senators suggest the money was given for political reasons, rather than merit, and expresses frustration that such decisions contributed to rising debt and inflation.